Hi everybody, it's Barbara with Acting for Community Theatre. Thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to talk about monologues. How to find a great monologue? Well, you start with searching online, probably, or in monologue books where they have standalone monologues, or monologue books that have monologues from plays. Either way, you're going to have to start somewhere and find some monologues that you can read over and decide if you like them. So my first question is, do you like the monologue? Does it resonate with some part of you, some part of your personality? Do you like the style? Do you like the way it's written? Do you like the topic? Do you like that it's sort of funny or sort of dramatic or one or the other or both? Do you like the monologue? That's the first thing, because if you don't like it, you're not going to enjoy actually playing it and enjoying it. Having fun with it, whether it's dramatic or comic, is essential. You have to love what you're doing. And the second thing I want to ask is, does it suit your personality? And that doesn't mean it has to be a representation of you, because what you want to portray is a character. But what it does mean is it part of your personality? We all have little bits of different personalities inside of us. That's why it's easy and fun to play a villain that you would never do the things that the villain does and says, but you love to play them because there's an itty bitty part of you that understands what that's like. It's relatable on some level. So just make sure that there's something in there for you or a side of your personality so that you can let it out. And of course, the third thing is, does it fit your age and your gender or your physical abilities? Just does it make sense for you to actually do this monologue? Number 4 would be, is it entertaining in some way? A lot of monologues can get really difficult. They can be really hard to get through. It's hard for a director to listen to them if they've had 4 or 5 of them in the same day and they're sort of feeling like dragged into the mud. There are times when monologues can get just hard to deal with. So I want to say, is it at least entertaining? Does it tell a great story? Does it keep you on the edge of your seat? Is it full of action? Is it full of comedy? Is it entertaining in some way, rather than just being a big Debbie Downer? And number 5, which connects directly to number 4, does it tell some kind of a story in some way? It doesn't actually have to be a once upon a time kind of story. It just has to have some sort of beginning, middle, and end, so the monologue feels like a complete, cohesive unit that we would be engaged in. Number 6, is it the right length? If this is for an audition, like I covered in the last video, it really needs to be about 1.5 minutes to maybe 2 minutes long. So make sure it's not too long, or if you can cut it down to 1.5 minutes, that's great. Tricky thing to do though, you better understand what you're doing before you try to edit a monologue. It's probably best to just try one that's about the right length to start with. So once that monologue fits those criteria, there's some other things to drill down on, and you really do need to understand these. The first one would be, who are you talking to? Now this is a big one. I often will sit and watch a monologue, sometimes in an audition and sometimes in an actual performance, and I think to myself, why are you speaking? And who are you talking to? And those are really important things that we're going to cover right now. So a lot of times the response I get is, well, I'm talking to the audience. But that feels a lot like a cop-out. It feels like an actor that hasn't really done the work. Because unless this is a presentational monologue and the fourth wall is completely down and you're actually telling the audience, yes, I'm an actor, you're an audience, and now I'm talking to you directly. Most monologues are not like that. Unless it's that, you're not talking to the audience. You have to give the audience some sort of quality so that you're talking to a group of people. You have to talk to the crowd at your father's eulogy, or you have to talk to your high school reunion group, or you have to talk to your bridge club, or I don't know who you have to talk to, your high school friends at a party. You have to talk to somebody. If you're talking to a crowd, it could just be a bunch of people in the grocery store. So in other words, something that you wouldn't normally do. That's often what theater is about. But it has to be somebody's, not just the audience, unless you're doing something very presentational or meta-theatrical. So think about it. It's a tough one, and you need to solve it. Other than that, you need to, if you're talking to a specific person, you need to perhaps put that person in a chair downstage, an empty chair, obviously, and then talk just above the back of the chair where you can actually see their imaginary face. Or you could talk to a picture frame if that person has passed away. Or you could talk to God. Or you could talk to a toy. Or anything that represents the person that you want to be speaking with. But you need to be talking to somebody. And the more specific that person is, the better it's going to be. Now, in a lot of monologues, you can tell who you're talking to. It's very clear, and you should know that. In other monologues, it might not be so clear, and in that case, you need to endow that person with something important. For example, it's a lot different talking to your lover than it is talking to just anybody on the street. So endow that person with something and make it kind of matter. If it's someone on the street inside the monologue, then what matters is the fact that you're actually opening up to a stranger. So always keep the stakes high. And this dovetails right into the next point, which is, what is the relationship? You need to identify what the relationship is between the two of you. Is there history here or is there not? Is it a stranger or a group, or is it your ex-lover? And another big thing is why. Why are you speaking? And why are you speaking now? Why now? Why haven't you spoken before? Was there just not an opportunity? If there was never an opportunity and you've never been in this position before, so you were speaking at your father's eulogy, for example, then why would you speak now? What is driving you to speak? And the most important thing that dovetails right into that idea of who are you speaking to and why are you speaking is the most important thing in theater. What are you fighting for? What do you want that you can get from that person right now? You have to be able to answer that question. It's the most important question there is when you're an actor. What do I want from that person, and how am I going to get it, and what's at stake, and how important is it, and it's why. This is also known as your motivation or your objective or your intention, and it's the most important thing you need to know. Why am I speaking to this person? Well, I'm speaking to them because I want something. And it better be something big, and it better be something that matters. You've got to fight for it. So you should always think of it as, what am I fighting for? And what can I get from that person? And that, of course, takes us to what are commonly known as stakes. What happens if I don't get that thing from that person? And the stakes should be high. It should be a really bad thing if you can't get what you want from that person. Because let's face it, playwrights don't put things that are average every day. We don't really care. It could be yes, it could be no. That kind of scenario, we don't put those on the stage. We don't put doing the dishes on the stage. We don't put talking about whether the kids need braces on the stage. We put things that really matter to people on the stage. And that's why you need to know what's at stake. What's going to happen if you don't get what you want from that person. And that's going to help drive that monologue. It's going to help drive that story and keep us interested. And another great question that I like to ask is my character doing this speech, whatever it is, off the cuff, or did they rehearse it? So there are completely different motivations behind, or sparks, I guess, behind each one. If my character has actually rehearsed this speech alone at home in front of a mirror, or they've thought about what they're going to say to this person if they ever get to confront them, or whatever it is, The interesting thing about that is they're going to start off and then they're going to get tripped up. They're going to get tripped up by, well, that's not quite what I wanted to say, or this isn't going the way that I wanted it to, or I'm looking at this person and they're not reacting the way that I imagined they would. They're going to get tripped up and they're going to have to keep readjusting. And that is an interesting thing to play and an interesting thing to watch. On the other hand, if they're winging it, if they had no idea they were going to speak today, no clue at all that all this was coming out of their mouth, and hopefully it's something that's been building up for a while, then that's really interesting to play because they're discovering it as they go. They have no idea what they're going to say next. They have no idea how they're going to finish their sentence. Most of us are doing that all the time. But just the fact that they're finding themselves speaking, that it's coming out in some sort of a rush or a flood, and it could be just almost a stream of consciousness thing. Or they may have to stop and try to gather themselves, maybe pull it all back in because they're embarrassed at what they're doing. Or the reverse is true. They're just going to let it all out and to hell with the consequences. These are all interesting things to play. But whether or not they've rehearsed it or it's coming off the cuff are very different things. And they're things that make acting fun. So see if you can figure which of those two things your monologue is. And the other thing I want to know is, does your character have a journey? So it's good to ask if the monologue has a story in it, but the reason that we need a story outside of keeping the audience engaged is the character has to have a story. They have to have some sort of a journey or an arc. In other words, you don't want your character to be the same at the end of the monologue as they were at the beginning. Now, it doesn't have to be a big shift. It could be a self-awareness. It could be a discovery. They could realize that they don't need forgiveness for somebody, that maybe what they want is revenge. They could figure out that they want something completely different, or maybe they don't need the person at all. But they have to change in some way. There should be some sort of journey or arc in the monologue, and you need to identify it. And then some technical things to think about in terms of your audition are, does the monologue offer you some range? And ranges can mean a couple of things. An emotional range. Are you going from here to here and there's an emotional journey involved? So you're showing the director that you can actually play different things. You're showing him that you can play some rage and you can play some uncertainty, for example, or some vulnerability. Range can also mean going from dramatic to comic in terms of style. Range can mean pace. Can you slow things right down and play stillness? And can you actually speed things up and the words are just flying out of your mouth? Range can mean a lot of things, but you should be able to play a range of things so your director sees that you're flexible. Those are a lot of things to think about. I understand I've given you a lot of points and a lot of notes and questions for you to think about as you choose your monologue. But just remember, outside of making it appropriate and the fact that you like it, outside of making sure that your character starts in one place and ends in somewhere else, another place, the only other things you really have to worry about are those key questions. Who am I speaking to? Why am I speaking to them? What do I want from them? What's in my way? What happens if I don't get it? Those are the really key things that you need to work on. So the rest of the notes are great, but those are the things that you should really focus on. So don't let this overwhelm you. Just focus on those key questions that I just asked. Make sure that it's a monologue that you like and that it suits the production that you're actually auditioning for. If it's a good monologue and it sort of tells a story and you've got all those key questions nailed down, you know who you're talking to and why, it's going to be fine and you're going to have a great time with it and just enjoy. But we're going to talk about the performance of that next. Okay, that's all for me today. I hope you found this instructive and take care and I will see you soon.